Hello and welcome to the fifth section of this course, using Ansible with cloud services and containers. In this section, we're going to take a look at AWS with Ansible. We're going to use Ansible to dynamically spin up an AWS security group and 20 AWS EC2 instances. We'll use Ansible to automatically configure our newly created systems and to deploy the Nginx-based app that we've created. We'll also automate the clear down of the newly created infrastructure. With Docker, we'll see how we can use Ansible to import new images, how we can then create containers from an image. We'll customize our newly created container using Ansible, and from this, we'll use Ansible to create an image. We'll then leverage Ansible to clean up our Docker environments. Hello and welcome to the first video of this section, AWS with Ansible. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at AWS with Ansible, how to configure Ansible for AWS support, creating EC2 instances through Ansible with AWS and adding IP addresses, how to use the AWS Dynamic Inventory in Ansible, spinning up our awesome web app using AWS, and finally terminating and removing AWS instances. In this section, we're going to take a look at how we can use Ansible for the automation and deployment of instances in AWS. The modules within Ansible for AWS are built using the popular Boto and Boto-free Python libraries, and therefore there's a lot of functionality for AWS as a result. For this section, you will need an AWS account. Amazon at the current time offer a free tier that can be used for this. If this is not available, I suggest reviewing the associated costs and becoming aware of the pricing structure. For the tasks that we're doing, there should not be a substantial cost involved. Just to note, if you leave the instances running, you may find yourself with an incurred cost. If you're new to AWS, research the pricing costs and also look into budgeting alerts. Okay, let's get started. In the AWS control panel, I currently have no instances running. If we go into key pairs, I have a key pair that already exists, and within AWS I have set up a security credential. Go into here and into access keys. I currently have the following security credential. If we go back to AWS into the EC2 section, within security groups, I currently have a default security group. The Ansible AWS modules use Boto, and correspondingly we need to have environment variables set up with our AWS information. So here I have some examples of what you're actually looking for. You would put your own information in. The information you see here is obviously fictional, and you would paste that information into your terminal so that you have this within your environment. For security reasons, I'm obviously not showing this, but you'll need to do this beforehand before you continue any further. I'm in section 5, video 1, AWS with Ansible, and I'm in revision 1. So we can see that here. And what we're going to do, we're going to look at a playbook to create our security group. We will want in this port 80 open for the web server and port 22 for SSH access so that we can configure our newly created guests through Ansible. Okay, so here within our playbook, we're working with a local connection, because this is going to be run from our control host here. At the moment, we have a task, which is using the EC2 group module. So this is part of Ansible. I've not had to actually do anything different here. It's one of the modules which is supplied in the many hundreds of modules which are available in Ansible. And here we have the parameters. So the name of the group that we're trying to set up, a description, where we would like to actually set this up, and the corresponding rules. So we have a rule here to open port 80, and we have a rule here to open port 22. If we try this at the moment, this is going to fail, but we will do this anyway. And the reason it is failing is because we do not have the corresponding Boto libraries. So we have the Ansible libraries, but those Ansible libraries are dependent on the Boto libraries. So we'll just clear here, and we'll install these libraries. I'm going to install Boto and Boto Free using pip. And it's just installing the dependencies as well. Okay, that's done. And if we try our playbook again, okay, so we have a success there. Let's have a look in the AWS console. And if we refresh here, okay, great. So we've got our Ansible security group there. Let's create some instances. If we look through the AWS catalog, so we go here into instances and into launch instance, and we have a variety of different images available. We were using CentOS before, so what we're going to take a look at is this Red Hat image here, which, as I say, is also part of the free tier. So the image we're actually interested in is this AMI-A1 Foxtrot 5 Echo 4 Charlie 5. We'll just clear this. And if we go into revision 2, and if we take a look at our playbook, what we have here are 2 additional tasks. So the first task, we're going to provision a set of instances. What we're going to do is spin up 20 instances in AWS. We're going to use the image ID that we just made reference to. We want these to be t2.micro. We are going to be using the group of Ansible. For the region, we're setting this as EU West 2. So I'm based in the United Kingdom. You might want to actually change this to a region which is more specific to you. We have a wait for true, so wait for the instances to actually be available. The exact count we're setting as 20. So this is something which is useful here. When you actually run this and reuse this playbook, it's not going to create more instances in that group. Once it actually sees that we've got 20 in there, it's going to stop. And that's referenced here. So that is in response to the count tag. We use that tag to actually designate these against. And the instance tags we're going to put as Ansible. We're going to register the output of this into a variable called EC2. And then here, what we're going to do is use the add host task to add these to a group called Ansible hosts. I know that when we get this information back, where we are registering in EC2, that the IP address is available here within the instances information. So we're going to use that to actually create our host group. Okay, finally, one last thing. We're going to actually show the group at the bottom. So quite simply, just a debug variable showing groups.ansible hosts. Let's clear and let's give this a go. Okay, so we had a lot of information there. Let's just scroll back up and have a look at some of the output. Okay, so we can see the information there about one of the AWS instances that was just created. And if we scroll down, we can actually see that we now have this group, and this group consists of these IP addresses. Great. If we now go back and have a look in our console, we can see there that we now have 20 run-in instances. Let's go back to the playbook. And if we rerun that again, it's going to fail on the creation of the instances. Now, this is a nuance of the module. Technically, I'm not asking for more instances than what I've already got, but it's hitting the instance limit exceeded error first. We can get around this quite simply with the ignore errors keyword. So if we look in the next revision, what we have is ignore_errors as true. And if we run this now, we're going to get a bit further, but because we haven't actually created the instances, nothing has been registered in the EC2 variable. And as a result, our next task fails. So you can see here, dict object has no attribute instances. So here, this is not a good approach. A better approach is for us to use a dynamic inventory that relates to AWS. Fortunately, there is already a dynamic inventory available for our use. There is also an associated ini file you can copy to etc Ansible, or as I'm going to do, you can set this with an ec2_ini_path variable to the location. Let's clear this here and go into revision 4. And what we're going to do here is make a directory called inventory. And within this, what we want to do, if we go into that directory and we want to fetch the inventory here from the Ansible GitHub contribution page. And if we scroll down here, we have an ec2.ini and an ec2.py. So we're just going to go into here and grab these. And we issue the command wget and paste in that URL. And we can change that to .ini. And there we have the ini file as well. Before we go any further, we're just going to make a quick change to that ini file. And what we're looking for is the cache max age. So as it says here, by default, when you're using this inventory, it's going to cache it for this amount of time. And whilst under a lot of scenarios, this would be okay, we're going to be making a lot of changes here. So we want the inventory to actually reflect the environment. So let's just change that to 0 and save that. And if we come back, what we can do now is set our ec2 ini path to inventory ec2.ini. Okay, that's done. And let's actually have a look at that inventory file. Let's give it a try as we did previously. Again, I'll clear here. And if we run our inventory here, let's just set the executable for this. And we give the -- list and pipe this through to more. Okay, so there we have it. There's a lot of information here, and you can see right at the top there that it's using the _meta approach that we discussed. So for each of the host vars that will be coming back from this, they are supplied within this key. So it's not going to need to be doing the -- host for every host. When we run that inventory, it's actually going to run against that and from the first call to -- list, it will have all of the information that it actually needs there. And let's just have a look. So we have this host here, and this has all of this information. And again, repeated information here for each of these hosts. And if we keep going down, you can then see it also gives some other useful information. So we have a group there. We have the hosts as per EC2 and EU West 2. It's a very verbose inventory. Just clear there. And we need to make a change to our ansible.config. So we can see that here we now have the inventory set to inventory/EC2, and we have increased the forks to match the number of systems. So we've actually got the forks set as 20. Within my home directory, I've got my PEM file, which I've downloaded from AWS. So if we look here at .ssh, and it's called Ansible AWS PEM. And what we need to do as well, just before we continue, is create a group file for this. So if we have a look at our group vars section, and in there we have tag name Ansible. So this is something that's coming back now from the inventory where we actually used that tag. And in there, we're specifying that we're using the SSH private key file, which is in the location I just showed you. And the Ansible user that we're going to connect as is EC2-user. So that's the default user account on the Amazon AWS Red Hat image. And we are using something else we've used before, the Ansible become, to gain super user privileges. So we're going to connect in as EC2-user, and then we're going to become the super user. Okay, so let's check if we can actually ping our hosts here with this. And it is tag_name_Ansible. And we'll use the ping module. Okay, so we've been successfully able to ping all our instances there. So our dynamic inventory is working as expected. Let's take a look at our playbook now, and we'll get rid of the previous approach where we were registering and using the add host. And within this, what we're going to do now is refresh our inventory. So after we've actually created our hosts, we're going to refresh the inventory to pull in that information. So here we're actually using the meta module to refresh the inventory. And underneath we have a new play. This play we are going to execute the Awesome Web role. So that is going to install our web application into the new AWS instance. And lastly, we're going to verify whether or not the instance, the service that we've just created, is available. We've got a little prompt in here: verify the service is available and continue to terminate. At this point, we're not terminating, but we're going to work on that later. First things first, let's actually get the instance up and running. Some changes to consider just before we kick off the execution. Previously, we were using a CentOS or a Ubuntu host. Now we're actually using a Red Hat system. So within the Awesome Web role and within the templates, a minor change here to the template. So now we're actually saying elif the distribution is Red Hat, we want to use the Red Hat logo. And correspondingly, we've added a vars for that particular image. So if we look in the vars section and in main, and there's the CentOS logo, there's the Ubuntu logo, and in addition, there is now the Red Hat logo. And some changes to the Nginx role to the specific tasks to accommodate Red Hat as well. So if we have a look at this, so we go into our Nginx role and we go into tasks and main. And if we go up to the top here, for the EPEL process, the installation of EPEL is different on CentOS to how it is on Red Hat. So we have this specific install EPEL Red Hat. And again, that's using the Ansible distribution equals Red Hat. And we're doing a yum install, but with a specific RPM path that we're looking for there. If we scroll on down, we've changed. So we need to use patch to make the changes that we were talking about. Now, because that will apply to both CentOS and Red Hat, we can actually work with the alternative variable here of Ansible _OS _family and set this to Red Hat. Again, the same thing being done for some of these others. So where the task applies to both CentOS and Red Hat, we can do that here. And if we scroll on down, and the firewall entry that you see there at the bottom, we do not need to make a change to this. This applies to CentOS, but where we are actually using this Red Hat image from Amazon, the firewall is actually controlled, as we saw, through the security groups where we were opening port 80 and port 22. So this doesn't apply here. So that's being kept as specific for CentOS. Okay, so now let's run our playbook. Okay, so it's now installing EPEL on Red Hat. And that's Nginx installed. We're into the patch section. Okay, that's positive. The HTTP service is okay there. Okay, so we have our prompts asking us to actually verify the service. So what we're going to do is just pick one of these. And if we paste this in, there we have it. That's working as expected. And we have the Red Hat logo as well. So what we'll do now, we'll just continue. And that's the playbook finished. So now we want to move on to the cleanup, where we terminate our instances and remove the security group. Prior to terminating the instances, we need to remove them from the security group. Let's take a look. Okay, so we have some additions here. And again, we're using the EC2 module and we're using delegate to. So we actually want this to be performed via our control host. And what we're actually doing here is setting the group ID to an empty group. So this is how you actually remove those from that security group. After they've been removed, we're then going to again use the EC2 module and the state as absent. We're passing in the region and the instance IDs. Finally, then at the bottom, we are removing the Ansible security group. Okay, let's give this a try. Okay, so we can pick an instance again. I'll pick this 52 one at the bottom. And we can check that. Yep, and that's working as expected. And now let's try and terminate these. We can ignore those warnings. And it's starting to terminate the instances. And it's removed our security group. Okay, so that looks good. We go back to the management console here and into EC2. And now our running instances is 0. If we go into this, we can actually see that all of these are terminated. So now with that done, what you can do, if you like, you can rerun that playbook again, and from scratch, it will create the instances, it will deploy the application, it's going to ask you to verify, then terminate, and you can repeat that over and over. So if you like, give that a try.